that was floated a couple of years ago, America and China running the world, would simply be unacceptable to the rest of us. So you need a kind of cooperative board system. And in my own view, we need to go away from an America that used to issue 10 commandments to the others into one that perhaps comes up with 10 suggestions once in a while.
Yes, Kishore, I mean, you're the American president who's decided to offer the world leadership. You. What are you about to do about it? I mean, give me one concrete thing which would demonstrate leadership to the world without actually the rest of the world taking offense.
There is wonderful things that the United States can do in many fleas. For example...
revalue the Chinese currency. It can't do it. You can't order them to do that.
Well, I think, first of all,
the
United States can get its house in order. You mentioned earlier a 5% consumption tax, something as simple as that could change the situation.
And that is going to thrill Singapore.
No, I think
it isn't. You know it isn't.
No, I think it is.
Well, it's going to say, my God, there's leadership.
It is a mistake.
It
is a mistake to think that nothing can be done.
I wasn't suggesting that. I was suggesting that you produce something that...
You can do something on the environmental front.
But the United States tried. Which is the great world power that actually decided to resist any serious environmental regulation? Not Washington, Beijing. So that's absurd.
The fundamental mistake we're making here is to think that the Western worldview reflects the global worldview.
All right,
and I would say, by the way, China's view enjoys much more sympathy in the rest of the world than the Western worldview.
We will return to precisely that point when we get back. China's worldview and what the rest of the world thinks of it.
I'm quite prepared unapologetically to say, actually, Jeffersonian philosophy of pluralism and religious tolerance is an absolute and unequivocal good thing. And I don't really care what they think about that in Tehran, actually.
And we are back with our galaxy of stars, Shashi Tharoor from India, Kishore Mahbubani from Singapore, and Simon Sharma from London, New York, and God knows where else. Kishore was saying before that we don't understand the Western worldview is dying. The Chinese worldview is something that more people have more sympathy for these days.
On the environment.
So on the environment, but I want to ask a more general question to Shashi. I'm actually struck by the opposite of what Kishore is saying, which is that over the last month, what you have seen is an international kind of condominium almost of countries agreeing with the United States that China is deliberately undervaluing its currency, that China is threatening Japan unnecessarily, that China is rattling the saber in Southeast Asia. That is to say, China's peaceful rise has hit a kind of big speed bump where people are beginning to realize, wait a minute, a bigger, more assertive China is... We're not so sure we love that idea, and I particularly found that. I was in South Korea 2 weeks ago, in India last week, and in both cases, they were quite concerned about China.
I think, by and large, most countries see China as, understandably, very focused on itself, that its relationship with the rest of the world is very much about what it can get in terms of resources and other benefits for its own growth, and therefore I think to suggest that the Chinese worldview was considered more attractive would stretch credulity to me. We in India respect China, but I would be hesitant to say that we find the Chinese worldview more attractive than the
Good, you don't want to lock up Nobel Prize winners. Good for you.
Yes, the editorial opinions in India on that were entirely in favour.
Can I briefly
respond and defend the Chinese worldview?
No, it's very simple. There are 7 billion people in the world. 800 million people live in the West. The rest live outside the West. If you go to the Islamic world, among the 1.2 billion Muslims, tell me that the Western worldview is much more attractive than the Chinese worldview.
I wish it were. I feel totally undefensive about that. I don't care. I don't care if the view of Jeffersonian democracy...
Let me finish. And then you have Latin America.
That's a shocking thing to say.
Latin America, and then you have Africa.
I don't care about demographic arithmetic. The fate of the world depends on actually judgments about, what the moral nature of political society is.
You don't care what the majority of the world thinks. And if they don't think like you, you're not happy. I fully understand that. But it's important, empirically, to try
Let's take
and
one
understand...
principle on which the peace of the world depends. Tyrannical theocracy or Jeffersonian tolerance, for example. I'm quite prepared unapologetically to say, actually, Jeffersonian philosophy of pluralism and religious tolerance is an absolute and unequivocal good thing. And I don't really care what they think about that in Tehran, actually, except as a threat to everybody else. So if you're telling me that X number of millions of people are willing to surrender to theocratic tyranny, I'd say it's so much the worse for them.
No, but you see, democracy means essentially that you listen to the voices of the people. The West
and
has
that's happening in Iran, for example.
But I would caution you, Kishore, it is fair to try to make a distinction between the people in many of these countries and their regimes. The leadership of many of these countries, which might prefer China to America, are actually
let me just finish. It is very difficult in a Western setting to explain the point that actually the majority of the world look at the world quite differently. And that's a simple
But they don't necessarily agree with the Chinese, is all I'm trying to say. I don't find a great Brazilian love for China. I don't find a great South Korean love for China. Japan, for example, I find that they are much more suspicious of China than they are of the United States.
I completely agree with all that.
Now we're adding up countries. Even your demography is not working so well.
No, but you see, you are also addressing a very awkward moment when China has gone through a very bad spot. And China overplayed its hand on Japan. That's very clear. It's obvious that they overplayed their hand. And what did the Chinese Prime Minister do? Arrange to speak to the Japanese Prime Minister after that, and then they switched off. I think they made a mistake.
And on that note, Simon Sharma, Kishore Mahbubani, Shashi Tharoor, thank you all very much. We will be right back.